And Bob Smith, he's very knowledgeable about music. Taught me a lot about music. Great guy. Bought us equipment. Took us to the jams. I think in the early days of Cut It Up Def, John Ski, we would go down and he would just bum rush, get into clubs, go to the booth. DJ would throw the record on right there, and that's how we got that street buzz right off the bat. Lazaro Mendez, Six Flags Atlantis. I still remember Cut It Up Def, the first record we pressed up. We walked right through the gates. Johnny just with the hustler, that New York hustler mentality, right through the gates, right up to the DJ, handed it to Laz. Laz already knew us that we were doing our thing, but we hadn't dropped anything yet. We gave him the record. I still remember him putting it on the platter, putting the earphone on, playing a little bit, looking up, giving us the thumbs up, threw that record right on, and it was on the air. And that'll never happen today. Like back in those days, mixed DJs were able to break records, and it's just a shame the way the radio is now. But so the single started taking off, and then it got actually bigger than Bob Smith could handle. So he wanted to bring in somebody to help with the distribution. Pandisc was a big label. We had went down there and talked to him. Bo Crane seemed like, definitely seemed like he knew what he was doing. Pretty Tony Studio was next door, and like all of these big names of people that we looked up to were doing their thing. So the deal was made. The album dropped in 1991. Cut It Up Def Miami Bass Jams, tracks that were made with me and Jimbo, even though Jimbo wasn't on the label anymore. Tracks with me and Lon, who used to be in Dynamics 2. I'd lived in the area with Dave and Lon and knew them both. And when Jimbo left the label, I was never signed, so I didn't feel like I had to be stuck on Cut It Up Def. I mean, I was the main guy doing the stuff on Cut It Up Def, but I was free to do whatever the hell I wanted. So when I met Lon and heard his beats and knew his history from Dynamics 2, and he was a cool guy and we got along really good, and so we decided to do some stuff together, and we came up with the name Chaos, which was a label that him and Dave did that they put Field of Bass on. And from what Lon tells me, I remember it differently, but I know he had this beat and it was called Too Much Bass, and I was like, man, that thing's a monster, we got to do that. I knew Kid Money was going to do it, but if he didn't do it, we got to do that. So we changed a couple of things, combined two different tracks, and we came up with Too Much Bass, which is one of my favorite of the bass records I've done. Actually, all the Chaos stuff is my favorite, because to me it's real b-boy, roots, turntable, breakdancing, hip-hop kind of stuff. So that's why it's always my favorite. Uh, Bob, he was in this doo-wop era, so he always wanted to look for these gimmicky things, and I would always butt heads with him, because I always wanted to do some real, like, stuff with integrity. I didn't want to, do the corny, gimmicky, try to blow up quick kind of thing. Even though I did some of those records just, to save face and to do it for Bob because he had done so much for us. So I did that. So anyway, Bass Jams comes out. I'm getting burnt out on the Miami bass thing. Hip hop is going strong. We're getting into the golden era of hip hop, like the early '90s. So I decided to get out of Florida and go back. I hadn't been to New York since I grew up there as a kid, so I decided to go up there. So I went up there, and Kev from the Whiz Kids was up there, and he was doing hip hop. So me and him kind of clicked up with some of the guys he was working with, and had a good time doing some hip hop stuff with those guys, playing at CBGBs and whatnot. And then Jimbo was working with Dynamics 2 Records, and said that he can get me a deal, probably get me some money in my pocket, like $5,000 or something. So I decided to come back. At the time, my daughter was born too, so I wanted to come back and do the right thing for my kids. So when I came back, every single car was playing Miami bass jams, and it was like I started laughing about it because it was like every single car that had bass was playing Cut It Up Def Miami bass jams, and I was laughing to myself like, wow, this thing is doing a lot better than I thought it was going to do. So just like everybody else's story that you've heard so far, I'm wondering where the money is. I'm a young kid. I'm going to Bo Crane. He's cutting me this and that, and he's trying to cater to my ego, is saying like, oh, we'll come in here and produce these guys, and we'll get you on an album with Magatron, which I was definitely happy. I was very happy to work with James. He's crazy. I was on some album with him, bass man of the, what, Acropolis or something, bass man of the something. James is always coming up with some crazy shit, but it was fun being in the studio with him and Neil Case. I learned a lot from Neil Case as far as mixing records, being in the studio. So even though I did get ripped off and all this, I try to look at the positive. I did learn things. I did learn stuff that people pay a lot of money to go to school for. I was 18, 19 years old, getting put in Studio Center, International Sound, these $100 an hour studios with SSL boards, 2-inch tape, and engineers like Neil Case and Jimmy Starr and Chuck Heeman. They were always really cool, and anytime I had questions about what they were doing, they would just tell me, and I took it in. Just like how I learned how to scratch in 5 minutes from watching DJ Red. I just soaked everything in, from the mixing board to the effects. And we're going back. This is before Pro Tools. This is when you did a take, you had to nail it, or else you had to start over. There was none of that punching in stuff. So I come from the era of doing the chorus different, every time, not just pasting it. And me and my boys, we've seen the whole evolution of this music business, from analog, from recording on tape to recording to digital tape to computers, from CDs to vinyl to now just in the cloud, iTunes. That's where it is now.